Committee on Gang Violence and Youth Development will now come to order. We have 2 items on the agenda. If you'd like to make a comment to this committee, you can fill out a public comment card in the back, and you can address matters relating to items 1 and item 2 as they appear on the agenda. If you'd like to make a general public comment to this committee, you can also fill out a card and make a general public comment, as we do that at the end of the committee once we've gone through the items on the agenda. With that, we will start with item number 2.
Item number 2, Board of Police Commissioners report in response to motion, Cardenas Garcetti instructing the Los Angeles Police Department and City Administrative Officer to report relative to the At the Park After Dark program, including program costs, impact on local crime rates, and the feasibility for program expansion.
Okay. Is anybody here to present? Item number 2. Okay.
Councilman, it doesn't sound like anybody's here from the mayor's office, which is really the driving force. If you want some insight from the police department, we'd be more than happy to.
Sure. I have some questions about what the feedback is in the community, and/or I was hoping somebody from Recreation and Parks could shed some light on the experience there, because everybody's aware of the fact that this kind of program they want to expand in the gang reduction zones throughout the city. So I wanted to get some feedback on that before we embark on any expansions. Anything from the police department, any light you could shed on that?
Okay, I'll start. Commander Gannon and I have attended at least 2, I think Pat's attended 3 meetings that have been chaired by Jeff Carr of the Mayor's Office relative to the program for this summer. And the way we understand it, it will be at 8 parks throughout the city. It will provide jobs for approximately 80 young people, ages 17 to 20, about 10 per park, council member. There will be programs that will run from 7 p.m. in the evening until midnight. The idea being to give young people an alternative, to give them a place to go, to provide an opportunity as it relates to jobs for them. And then to take a look at what impact this has had on the community as it relates to crime, fear, and how the community feels about the opportunity and whether or not they embraced it. From the police department's standpoint, our role is to provide extra patrol, to visit the park as time will allow, and to ensure the safety of those working at the park, those attending the park, particularly when it closes around midnight, to have a presence, and we intend to fulfill that obligation, certainly. Pat, you want to add to that?
No, this is Commander Pat Gannon. The only thing that I can add is that it's going to be on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights, right, from 7 until midnight. And the reason, originally we had talked about having it from 4 or 5 to 7, but there are other programs at the park that it would interrupt, so they moved the times back to 7, which I thought was appropriate. But Commander Albanese is correct. We've attended a number of meetings. We brought together our staff along with Parks and Rec and the Mayor's Office, and together to discuss what is trying to be accomplished, and then we'll have another meeting, but there's already meetings scheduled between park staffs and individual captains in their areas to support the effort.
Okay. All right. So activity on the park site obviously is going to be handled by Rec and Parks. There's extra patrols in the community by the police department, and then also I'm assuming that there's going to be data comparisons in those communities in previous years in that same period of time during the summer, and then during the period of time in which we have expanded park hours.
And that has been discussed, council member, at the meetings, to take a look at crime and whether or not this program has had a positive impact on crime within the immediate community surrounding the parks, the 8 parks, correct?
Yeah, the Mayor's Office solicited us for specific reporting districts around those parks so that we could accomplish that measurement.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting just occurred to me that we need to figure out some way to assess not only the amount of crime that does or did happen and or hopefully doesn't happen during the same period of time this year in and around those parks, but also somehow assess the age and or any other categorical information of victims of crime. For example, I would assume very likely you're going to have minors and young adults participating at the park sites, which hopefully means that if there is any crime occurring, then they're not going to be a victim because they're going to be at the park instead of either on the street or hanging out outside the park. We tend to collect information mostly on crime statistics of occurrence, but I'm wondering if there's any way we can start to break it down even further about age of victims and any other categorical information that we might have collected in the past that we can compare to this year once we take a look back. You understand what I'm saying? Let me give you an example. We hear on the news that there was a gang-related shooting. The way it's been explained to me, that means either the perpetrator was a gang member and or a victim of the incident was a gang member or a gang-affiliated individual. I'm wondering what impact we're going to be having on gang-affiliated individuals not being victims as much in the past in these areas during those hours compared to when we didn't have those extra hours at the park and perhaps they were. There is a nexus between the victims being gang-related victims versus just somebody who unfortunately was caught in the crossfire or what have you. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
I understand, and that's clearly something that our analysis, our statistics can point out. The other thing that may be interesting, and of course, again, the mayor's office is the lead on this program. Rec and Parks is the primary element of facilitating the program. I would think that Rec and Parks could also identify the demographics, not by name necessarily, because we wouldn't need that type of information, but how many 14 through 16-year-olds and how many 16 through 18-year-olds?
How many females?
How many males? Exactly, those kinds of things. Who's attending, taking advantage of the funding that's going to go into all the programs that are going to be at the parks. For example, they're going to have, depending on what the particular park allows, they'll have baseball, soccer, swimming, computer exercises, a kind of classroom type thing, gymnasium for basketball. So they'll have a lot to offer at the 8 parks, and it'd be interesting to know who's going to take advantage of that.
And what's being taken advantage of. You know, if they have a chess club and nobody's playing chess, but they have a swimming pool that's overcrowded and they have to turn kids down because, you know, it's filled to capacity until 11 o'clock at night. Those are the kinds of things that Park and Recs should be hopefully able to ascertain.
And they have discussed that in the meetings that we've been at. They're allowing their park directors a lot of flexibility with their programs to meet the needs of this specific program. They're not putting it into okay, you're a sports park, so we just want you to do soccer, and nobody's there to do soccer. They've really opened it up for the imagination, and the mayor's office and each of the program coordinators for the gang reduction zones are playing a big role in trying to help with that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had some of those discussions with Rec and Parks, so hopefully they're developing that into their assessment tools as well. Okay. Anything else you'd like to add on this? Okay. Thank you. With that, we'll note and file the Board of Police Commissioners report as recommended by Art, Recreation and Parks. I'm looking that we do not have a public comment card on item number 2. It appears that we have 2 public comment cards for item number 1, which we'll get to next. With that, we'll note and file the report and also instruct the CAO and the Rec and Parks to report to committee relative to expanding this program at recreation centers in high-crime areas throughout the city, and instruct Recreation and Parks and the CAO to report on any current or proposed expansion of service hours at rec and park facilities by council district or designated by the mayor's office of the Gang Reduction and Youth Development. And we'll hopefully have those reports in the next 2 weeks as the new fiscal year starts in about 5 weeks. And the summer is underway come July. If there's any issue with a report back within the next 2 weeks, please notify my office so we can make the adjustments and calendar it appropriately. Okay? Any other comments? Okay, seeing and hearing none, public comment has been opened on this item. Seeing and hearing no public comment cards or anybody coming forward to make public comment on item number 2, public comment on item number 2 is now closed. With that, we'll now move to item number 1.
Item number 1, motion, Cardenas Perry, relative to instructing the chief legislative analyst with the assistance of appropriate city departments to report on the status of consolidating the city's gang programs within the office of the mayor, and a proposed request for proposals for gang intervention services and gang reduction youth development zones and citywide in general.
Thank you, officers. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on item number 1. Okay. More public comment cards on this item. Okay. At this time, what I'd like to do is open it up for public comment. We have several public comment cards. This is all relative to something new that we're doing in this category when it comes to intervention. Or intervention programs, and the city is commencing the process of assessing itself and looking into how we would go about putting out a request for qualifications prior to going out and putting out a request for proposals. In the past, we have done it by request for proposals, and in my opinion, I think that we are going to move to a much more sophisticated and specific way in which we're going to be choosing to fund intervention programs out in the communities. By my experience being involved in this matter as a policymaker for about 11 years now, that unfortunately the city of Los Angeles has been mixing its intervention and prevention dollars without delineating the difference and without appropriately funding intervention specific and prevention specific. So rolling forward, come July 1st, the city of Los Angeles expects to start the improvements and delineations of what will be funded under the guise of prevention, what will be funded under the guise of intervention, and also, and obviously, if there's any programs out there that can prove that they do in fact provide both services and intervention and prevention, then they will be having the opportunity to vie for those contracts and perhaps even be awarded contracts specifically in intervention as a category and prevention as another category, and appropriately be having to report back and communicate with the city as to how they administered those prevention dollars specifically and how they administered those intervention dollars specifically. And each contract will be respected and expected to be to have full reports and appropriate communication based on the individual contract. With that, I'll call the people up in the order that the public comment cards are before me. First one is Alex Sanchez, and then Kim McGill and Belinda Walker. You can all come up at the same time. There's more than one seat. And again, Alex Sanchez, Kim McGill, and Belinda Walker. Who wants to go first? Ladies? There's a gentleman present. Okay. Kim, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Well, we're here to congratulate the city that they are moving ahead with a request for qualifications on gang intervention work. We want to support that as much as possible. We do want to stipulate a couple of things, however. First, we want to include in the RFQ that agencies that are can both apply and be considered for this funding must work with gang-involved and gang-affiliated youth, and that they have a history of conducting this work with this population. Secondly, while many of these funds in the past have gone to services that reach the general youth population or even a term that's often used, high-risk youth. We want to say that that is not the population we're talking about, that these funds must only be for agencies that have both processes, protocols, and direct programming that serves young people that are currently gang-involved or gang-affiliated youth and their families. Finally, the Youth Justice Coalition is concerned about the original RFP that went out from the mayor's office, that it only really targeted agencies that had budgets of $500,000 or more over the course of 3 years. And we feel that a lot of the agencies that do gang intervention work are really incredible agencies that work with much smaller budgets.
But you're referring to an RFP that went out on prevention.
Right. So what
Okay.
we're also...
Let me make it clear and for the record, the prevention RFP was not a product of this committee or a product of the city council. That was done somewhat unilaterally by the mayor's office. I support and respect the fact that they have certain responsibilities and timelines to adhere to, but at the same time, everyone in the city, programs, departments, the mayor's office, are all going to be held accountable according to the rhetoric that all of us agreed to, both program providers, departments, the mayor's office, myself personally as a council member, my colleagues on this committee, and the city council, the controller, the city attorney, all of the electeds in the city of Los Angeles, and this is on my time, don't worry, Kim. All the electeds in the city of Los Angeles have all agreed that everything going forward when it comes to prevention, intervention, reentry, programs that have to do with juvenile justice in the city of Los Angeles are all going to be done in the full light of the community, and all are going to have report systems in place. It's all going to be done in a manner in which there's transparency, accountability, and efficiency. And so with that, we're going to continue in that vein. And with all due respect, again, I respect the fact that the mayor's office felt compelled to put out that RFP. It is their prerogative to do so. It's certainly within the purview of the new paradigm in the city of Los Angeles. But at the same time, when it comes to the intervention RFQ, this committee and the mayor's office and myself as the chairman of this committee are going to be very involved in this process. Okay? Continue.
I appreciate that you guys will be involved and that the oversight will be there. And that's just my third point, that whatever RFQ be released, that it take into consideration the smaller grassroots organizations that have been doing this work, some of them.
You can continue. I took up your time. Go ahead.
It's all right, some of them for 2 and 3 decades, and that they might not meet a $500,000 a year threshold, but they're doing outstanding work.
So what is your contention about the $500,000 threshold?
That it left out a lot of amazing programs. We had just in the area that, one of the gang reduction zones that we work in, we had about 60 people showed up for a meeting to directly talk about that RFP, and many of them have been doing work, very incredible work, and were very excited about applying and then didn't meet the requirements in terms of what their budget had to be for 3 consecutive years to apply. So what it means is that in the case of where the gang reduction zones nearest us are, there aren't even hardly any agencies, there in some cases any agencies located within those gang reduction zones that meet that requirement. It, I think, continues a long-standing tradition that LA's had that I think is a bad tradition, that organizations that don't exist in a particular community are the ones that are funded to serve a community, and they're there from, I'm not saying this is true for all organizations, but oftentimes they're there from 9 to 5. And then when the majority of the violence is happening, you have grassroots groups that are on the ground doing the work, 24/7 that can never apply for.
So are you telling this committee that whatever RFQ goes out on the intervention, there should be an element of explanation by anybody who applies and explaining what kind of hours that they do apply themselves to, not just saying that we could go out in the middle of the night. They need to commit to the fact and adhere in writing that they do go out in the middle of the night, if in fact the situation warrants it within the purview of the contract and the elements of responsibility that they are to take on in those communities. Is that part of what you're saying?
Excellent, and I think they could also say what's their history and their relationships within that community that they're choosing to serve.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about history and relationships in that community, which is something that's hard to ascertain. Are you alluding to the element of street credibility and things of that nature?
I think it's street credibility, it's credibility with families, it's credibility with the churches and other grassroots organizations, but I think street credibility would be my number one concern.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the RFQ should actually include tangible explanations of the applicable organization's understanding of what languages are spoken in that community as well, what the demographics of that community are?
I would say beyond understanding it, demonstrating that they have the capacity to actually speak in those languages. In other words, they have people on staff that speak those languages. They have people on staff that reflect those cultures themselves. I think that would be important.
Well, actually, what comes to mind in the dialogue that I'm having with you right now is, it sounds to me as though what you're describing to us is that what we should be doing is making sure that we have, that we expect to have applications in this RFQ process that actually speak to what they're committing to do, not just an academic understanding of what the problem is and an academic explanation as to what needs to be done. You follow what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Because those are two different things. I can get a professor to come in here. Matter of fact, I've had various professors come in here who have admitted that they do not operate on the streets, but they have in fact explained, and rightfully so and accurately, what the elements of the problems are, and then philosophically they've been able to explain to this committee, to us as policymakers, what they think would work and what needs to be done. But I respect the fact that they admit that they don't apply that, but they think that that would actually help the situation as far as
I
solutions.
think it would be good if the RFQ required people not only to propose what the problems are, but also not only what the solutions are, but how they've carried out those solutions in the past. What's been their track record in actually solving violence in that community?
Now, another thing as well, I think it's important, and this touches on the element of the RFP process that just went out for the prevention, and that is, there are organizations that do prevention and or intervention work in the communities that haven't gotten paid by public entities for that work.
Right.
So they've either been doing it voluntarily or been counting on small grants or what have you to keep them going along, literally to keep the lights on, and have been putting their men and women hours out for free, yet the end results of their work are priceless, in my opinion, and they have saved lives, they have intervened, they have assisted in keeping the peace on the streets and the violence down when it could have gotten even worse. So what you're coming back to your previous point, if we were to put out an RFQ that would exclude organizations that have received a certain threshold of funding in the past or more, then we may be inadvertently excluding some of the best organizations with the best capability and track record out there.
I totally agree with that. I also think that we speak a lot about the 61 gang intervention workers. Those are the funded gang intervention workers. So there's no inventory of all the gang intervention workers that have been doing this voluntarily. And I think there should be some kind of support for people that may not have the capacity administratively, but are doing outstanding program work to access these funds, whether it's having some of the groups that have more experience on the administrative side to be an umbrella for those smaller intervention organizations to get kind of like incubated, I guess you could say.
Well, are you suggesting that if an organization is willing to recognize that it may fall short on their capacity for administrative abilities, that they should be able to put in their RFQ and admit that they would be contracting with another agency, and that they welcome that other agency's capacity that they would be contracting them with, that they be looked at in order to confirm that as a package that RFQ should be considered and perhaps be put in the RFQ pool?
Contracting would be one way to do it. They could also be the lead agency and have some of their funds go toward someone mentoring or coaching them to build their organization.
Okay, so let me ask you this: are you talking about? Are you saying they should allow them to work with lead agencies, or contract other agencies?
I would give
so
both opportunities, because if you're always a subcontractor, and I'm not speaking in this case about the Justice Coalition, I'm really speaking about groups that haven't even started the process of, creating books, or, if you're always a subcontractor, it doesn't always give you the ability to grow your organization. And I think one of our goals would be, because I haven't seen this, is that people put in hundreds and thousands of hours on the street, And at the end of it, they've saved a lot of lives, but them as an organization haven't gotten any stronger. And they as individuals, in terms of their capacity to do the work over time, hasn't gotten any stronger. So I think we want to grow the violence prevention field and the intervention field in a way that we're growing strong organizations and not just strong communities.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much, Kim. Belinda.
Thank you, Councilman Cardenas. First of all, I want to underscore and echo everything that Kim just said and add several points to it. In no particular order of importance, but I will start with the issue of the $500,000 limit that she mentioned. I would submit that the real issue here is fiscal responsibility, not the amount of an organization's annual budget. And as long as an organization, whether its budget is $100,000 or $1 million, it demonstrates that fiscal responsibility. That ought to be what the funder, in this case the city, is looking at. Of course, absolutely in lines with the transparency and accountability of which you are speaking. Number two, Girls and Gangs, our organization works in the probation camps and primarily, and also with girls in the community who are on probation. And I'd like to underscore that the need for expertise in gang intervention training, skill sets is essential with this population, that the overlap in terms of characteristics for girls in the juvenile justice system and girls who are in gangs is virtually identical, whether or not the girls are openly admitting that they are in gangs. The need for prong one and prong two services by people who are delivering services in the camps and to girls on probation in the community is essential. The last point I would like to make here relates to another one Kim just made, and that is that the question you asked her about gang workers being able to reflect the culture, speak the language, reflect the culture of the different ethnicities within a particular gang reduction zone. I would argue that they
Continue.
Thank you. That they need to understand the gang culture within the ethnic culture. That to understand the ethnic culture alone is not enough. That they need to have the expertise of dealing with gang members within the specific ethnic cultures.
Well, you touch on something, well, in my mind, I think you're touching on something else as well. It's not just ethnic cultures, it's also geographic communities as well. Certain communities have certain gangs, and the dynamic of a community having two very notorious gangs, that community might be dealt with and handled in a certain way. That you might have a community 5 miles away that they have 3 or 4 very notorious gangs, and you would apply intervention, both prong one and prong two, mostly prong one, very differently in one community versus the other, even though ethnically they might look identical. But geographically, there's dynamics going on that cause a totally different kind of application.
If I'm understanding your point, sir, the point I think is the quality of service delivery, which should transcend any geographic boundary, period. And I would certainly agree with that the people who are able to deliver the services, prong one, prong two, that are needed are the ones who should be delivering those services, whether they are based in a specific GRZ or whether they are based a mile or two outside of it. And in some cases, perhaps the optimal solution would be for both sets of workers to be working more closely together, of course, based on their decision to do so, not a forced marriage from the top, because I don't think things will work that way.
Okay. And also, I'm sure, I would think that you are probably as aware or as sensitive as anybody when it comes to if we're going to be asking somebody to engage in gender-specific programs, that they should have an ability to either show and demonstrate a track record of doing so.
Absolutely.
Or certainly demonstrate unequivocally that they have the capacity to embark
Absolutely.
on that should they be funded.
Absolutely, and thank you for mentioning that. To me, that goes without saying. The other thing I would like to request is that rather than the term gender-specific services, when referring to girls and young women, we use the term female responsive.
Female responsive.
Female responsive, yes, sir.
Okay.
Very much so.
Because gender specific could mean males.
Yes, and I have seen, at least at the state level with one grant, a $500,000 grant go to an entirely male population. Then it was labeled gender-specific.
Really?
Yep.
Who messed that one up?
State Department of Justice, Kim and I were both parts of the proposal.
That's that new grant process that the governor started and all that, just this year?
Prior to this, about a year ago.
Yeah, about a
A
year.
year ago?
Yeah, we were,
But that's not Shift Cárdenas money, right?
no, it wasn't Shift Cardenas money.
Not that they're applying it correctly. I have it on good authority that the author's really upset with the way they're applying it,
Yeah.
specifically in LA County and throughout the state of California.
Yeah, I thank you for your remarks yesterday morning at the Pat Brown Institute on that point. But yes, that, Kim and I were both part of a coalition of female responsive organizations that submitted a grant for the complete redesign and of girls' camps.
Can I say one?
Please.
Sure.
I also don't think that young men have gotten gender responsive or, gender quality services. In other words, there's very few programs that have really looked to the research or the on-the-ground work done of, say, Luis Rodriguez, who's really developed a whole rites of passage methodology to working with young men and taking young men to boys to manhood. I think most programming that works with young men also does it outside the context of gender and what young men need. So I think that the requests we're making are for both young men and young women, both, but that the idea of having female responsive makes it very clear if there's certain funds that are only supposed to go to young women.
Well, I think what it requires us to do is for us to have every program give an explanation of who they are addressing, who they feel they're capable of addressing. Are they addressing only males? Are they addressing only women? Or do they feel strong enough to say that we know how to address either should they come our way and we need to address that issue?
I agree entirely, and I'd urge you to take it one step further, and that is, especially in a co-ed situation, that they understand the critical nuances so that there are male responsive services and female responsive services, that expertise is there, whether the programs are sex segregated or co-ed. And I'd like to quickly underscore the importance of Kim's point. The American Association of University Women recently published a report which is going to, I think, be receiving a lot of press, and it is highlighting the issue that boys are falling behind girls. And I do use quote unquote in that. But this issue of the needs of boys as a specific, and young men as a specific group, I think is going to become increasingly critical and very, very important. And Los Angeles could be on the cutting edge of really teasing out and addressing the deep needs of both populations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, and thank you for the extra time.
And I want everybody to understand, you can submit on the record to this committee or submit to my office any documentation or any recommendations or any explanations that you think would benefit our process. You're welcome to do so. This is going to be a very involved process, and there's going to be many, many, many hours of work before this product is put out. I think it's very critical that we take it to that level because we are doing something very different. Too many people want to point to interpret things as failures if we don't do enough right the first time, and perhaps interfere with us being able to continue this and improve on it year to year. So it's to me, it's very important that when we get out of the gate with the first RFQ process and the first go-around of actual funding, that we get as much of it right as possible. And I can promise you this, there will be improvements and changes as the years go on. As long as I'm here, as long as I'm involved, I definitely understand that we need to be a process that evolves and changes and improves, not a process that's stagnant. And in my opinion, that's been the issue with the way the city of Los Angeles has handled this for the last 25 years or so. Too much stagnation, too much that's just the way we've done it before, and too much resistance to listening to the practitioners and wanting to make the proper changes so that it's actually much more applicable realistically on the street level. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alex.
Good morning, Councilman. We work, and I couldn't agree more with this, ladies, in regards of the work that needs to be focused on in regards to ethnicity and gender. I work in the Pico Union area, where the community is mostly Central American, which has been one of the times where media has taken on a lot of the crimes that are being committed within those communities, which has translated throughout the county, the states, and even abroad in other countries. So I could not agree more in regards of being able to have agencies that are qualified to be able to speak the language that's mostly spoken in those communities, which is Spanish. We've been able to work with the community, with the business, with gang members in the area, and so we believe that this RFQ procedure should have agencies applying that meet those levels set forth by the prong 1 and 2 gang intervention model, that are able to meet being able to have a track record historically and the experience to be able to mediate ceasefires, rumor control, and all the other ones, which is crisis management, and also helping those immediate victims that are involved at that moment. Those agencies should have that experience. Also, there should be a verifying system which agencies that are applying could be verified that actually are able to do this. For instance, we have agencies that are not out there, publicly known throughout the community.
Continue.
We've asked if some of those agencies are in the area where we've been called over to do some other gang intervention work. We've been asked, have you called these agencies? And they do not know of those agencies. So those agencies that are qualifying should also be known in the community by other agencies in the community, by community leaders in those communities, by the schools in those communities, by business owners in those communities. All those stakeholders that have been impacted by the gang violence should know those agencies by name and numbers, where they could call those agencies that have this gang intervention funding to be able to be called anytime, not just 9 to 5, but at any time to be able to mediate in a crisis moment in that period of time. So this is something that agencies should be able to demonstrate when applying through this RFQ. Thank you.
Is that it, Alex? Nothing else?
Well, I could just keep on going, but I think that there's some
We're
other people.
We're fast tracking, Alex. So if anything you could think of that you could share with this committee, I welcome it.
Well,
I always welcome it, but we're not going to have 10 meetings like this. So
Yes.
we got to get as much of this out here as we can, as soon as possible.
Well, you know, I guess as an agency working in the Central American community, we have had a lot of experience in regards of being able to talk with the Central American gangs that are in the community, that other gang intervention agencies have not been effective in speaking and mediating. I believe that agencies can meet different levels of their expertise. I may not, or this agency may not be able to work with the Armenian community in regards of the Armenian gangs or the Cambodian gangs in Long Beach and so on. So to meet, intervention agencies applying should meet those guidelines, should have individuals that can be able to speak that language, but also not forgetting the prong 2 in all of this, that agencies also applying that are prong 2 for gang intervention funds should meet those guidelines, those levels that were set forth by the gang intervention model, that those agencies that are providing tattoo removal, those agencies that are providing mental health, should be directly working with the gang intervention agencies, the prong 1, where they are taking all their youth and applying those wraparound services that they apply for those funds. That should also have this verifying system in which we should track down that every one of those individuals that were sent to those prong 2 should be meeting with their needs and those fundings that those agencies are receiving.
So, what you're reminding us about is that we need to make sure that we have appropriate tracking. We need to make sure that we have the appropriate dialogue with these agencies and organizations to make sure that they are holding not only themselves accountable, but other related agencies that are required to provide the services, whether be it category 1 or prong 2, such as, for example, tattoo removal. That should be documented that tattoo removal is occurring with certain constituents and that is part of the service. And then also, one of the things that I think it's very important in that information is, what if, heaven forbid this would ever happen, it happens all the time in this arena, an organization is unfunded in its activities, related activities, and say we come a year later and realize that a particular organization is well connected, it is going above and beyond the call of duty, but they're not being funded for certain activities. We should be willing and able to adjust their contract a year later, not adjust it down, but adjust it up based on the data and information that they provided. And the fact of the matter is that we have ways in which to verify that level of activity is occurring. So is that part of what you welcome?
Yes, obviously that needs to be in place where this agency should be accountable to those fundings that they're being given. The other thing will be that we have agencies such as what Kim was talking about that are small agencies that are working hard at this. As I mentioned before, we have not gotten any city funding except for a little art project that we did for a summer. But in regards of prevention and intervention funding, we've been relying on foundations. So I think that one of the key things is what's been spoken about is the capacity building. There needs to be capacity building funding too, to help those agencies develop their infrastructure. Because there are agencies that are actually doing the work, hard work, but needs that extra capacity building in order to sustain that work beyond city funding. Because city funding, and we've seen sometimes, do not provide that check on time. And it becomes difficult to keep good gang intervention workers working when they haven't been paid for the last month or so. So how do you develop a sustaining organization in which they could seek funding in different areas beyond city funding, and be able to sustain themselves and provide those services that are needed? Our work has gone beyond the city, has gone beyond the Pico Union or Koreatown area into places like Hampstead, Long Island, in Langley Park in Maryland, and Virginia, where there has been a lot of issues around the Central American gangs. And we know that we need to develop our capacity to be able to take not our experience and this exciting moment, I should say, in regards of what the process that is taking place in the city in regards of the whole gang intervention piece, to take it beyond Los Angeles. And I think that the experts are us in regards of being able to go out there, being able to testify in courtrooms in regards of our constituency, being able to go to LAUSD and present something that will meet those requirements and to be able to implement our programs in some of those schools that have been an issue for us. in our programs that we've been doing in mostly charter schools that we've seen that are very effective, but we cannot go inside LAUSD because there's so many loopholes that we got to jump through. So I think that all of that will be something in which, as building our professionalism, should be set in place in order to build our capacity to do a better job in our community.
One of the things that a lot of people don't understand, and you probably understand it as well as anybody, Alex, and that is that there's a big difference between Mexican-American gangs, Salvadoran gangs, and other gangs. A lot of Americans just see, oh, those are Latinos. It's a Latino gang. Right. Very different, different culture, different mindset. Some of the elements of what their activities and or reasons for coming together as a gang are different, aren't they?
Obviously, we have...
no, don't say obviously. You and I might understand that, but you're speaking on the record to the people of Los Angeles. So what do you mean, obviously?
Well, it's only a matter of really looking at the historical migration of different ethnic groups that have come into this country. We've had Vietnamese that came during the Vietnam era. They were refugees. They had their trauma in regards to the conflict that they went through and the communities that they went through. Now we have Vietnamese gangs, we have Cambodian gangs that were part of that conflict. Their trauma or their issues were differently from the Mexican communities, nor the Chicano community that was here before. Then we have the migration of the Central Americans in regards of their trauma that we're going through in regards of the Civil War in Central America. You know that they have met and confronted with traumatizing moments in their young life in which they were traumatized, hadn't witnessed their mothers raped or killed by military personnel or death squads. And now we see, you know, the same issue with the Armenian community. So, you know, we have different dynamics.
Don't forget the Russian community.
And the Russian community.
A lot of them had their trauma, and they're now here in Los Angeles. North Hollywood, for example, has a big Russian community, and they're having some issues with gangs. Perhaps not so much the youth gangs, but adults. Still, it's a different mindset, it's a different culture, yet at the same time we're seeing some of the elements of violence you know, manifesting in certain communities with those communities. But can you give me an example of how young a person might have been recruited in El Salvador, be it by the rebel forces or the government forces, to be recruited to bear arms and to be part of that force?
Well, you know, one of the ages that was basically set on paper was age 12 for the military. Actually, you had armed patrol officers recruiting based on ages documented in school records, and going into schools and picking out the 12-year-olds that had just turned 12 into the military. Now you had the other aspect of the guerrilla that was also doing the same thing. In their own ways, in the jungles, recruiting individuals to fight. After a while, it became, you killed my family, so I'm your rival. It wasn't about a lot of the political agendas that they had, but in the end, you know, that's why this peace truce came about, because it was about rivalry. It was about a big old gang war in between the government and the guerrillas, in which you know, people have been killed and they were fighting each other. You know, and now we have two political parties down there. I think that this comes to the point that I'm trying to make in regards of race relations. You know, because we see that this migrant individuals that are coming into our country, into Los Angeles, which is one of the most diverse cities in the nation, it also lacks the cultural relations that should be built. You know, I lived in Koreatown next to a building that was full of Koreans, and I never made a friend. We never spoke to them, and they never spoke to us. There was no cultural exchange at all. And I think that that's why now we see individuals, when I speak in schools around race relations, as we did at the Los Angeles Technology Center, which is a continuation school. We had a conference, and we asked, well, how many of you are Mexicans? How many of you are Central Americans? How many of you are Colombians? And different Latinos were raising their hands, and the African Americans were just looking at them and looking at him saying, "What, I thought you all were Mexicans." And then I asked, how many of you are Belizeans? How many of you guys Dominican Republic? How many of you guys are Central American? And you saw some Africans that look black raising their hands, and everybody, all the Latinos looking at him and saying, "But I thought you were black." Well, he is African descent. So there's a different mixture of races between our own people, but stereotypes are dividing and putting racial tensions between our community, where we should be addressing the issue of social culture. And that brings it to the table, in which, how could we bring in some funding also to address that issue in regards to the gang intervention work that is being done out there? Because we know that part of the racial tensions in our community has also been gang related. And if we not involve ourselves into that topic as well, fully, then we're missing a big piece out of all of this in regards to really bringing this cultural exchange and really being actively involved in reducing the violence that is at times mostly racially motivated. But when we're talking about gangs that don't get along with gangs, one just happens to be Latino, one so happens to be African American, be able to identify that as well. But we need to be fully involved.
Thank you. I think it's important for the people of Los Angeles to understand a lot of these nuances. It's my belief that the sensationalism of the news media and talk radio and all of that, they like to generalize way, way too much, and they like to simplify these matters. They are very complicated, and the sad fact of the matter is, in my opinion, a lot of the talk radios and the news media, they actually are fooling the public into thinking that there's only one way to address this issue, and that is incarceration. When in fact, I think the truth is going to bear out that that when we fund intervention programs in the city of Los Angeles, by and large, the success rate is going to be far, far, far beyond what the recidivism rate is for people who are not involved in programs and just go to prison and come out. And also, in addition to that, what we're going to find is to incarcerate people is a drain on the tax dollars at as much as 5 to 10 to 20 times as much as if somebody were to participate in a program and no longer commit crimes. The rate of cost for adults in California is approximately $50,000 per adult to incarcerate for a 12-month period, and for juveniles, it's as much as $250,000 a year to incarcerate a juvenile. I have never, ever, ever heard of an intervention program spending $50,000 to $250,000 per pupil in order to address their issues. But oddly enough, the root of the funding is still the tax dollar of the public. And in some cases, the same exact funding source is the same source that we dedicate too many of those dollars to incarceration, which, by the way, people need to understand. When I arrived in the legislature and I started getting involved in these matters, I found out that the term rehabilitation was actually officially deleted from our adult system in California. And when I was there and passed the Schiff Cardenas Act, we were on our way to dismantling that terminology and that purpose in our juvenile system in the state of California, which makes no sense whatsoever. Other countries laugh at us, cynically laugh at America, because we have become a society where it's pure punishment, and to rehabilitate really is a small part of what we do in this country. Yet we have other countries with less resources who are able to prove on a daily basis and annually be able to show us that there are other ways of reducing crime and making sure that we have a reduction in the number of people who are committing crimes. And yet, so far, we just don't seem to want to take that step. But I think intervention, the way we should do it in Los Angeles, and if we do it right, is going to be a glaring example of the direction this country needs to go in. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Robert Hernandez, Carlos Rodriguez, and Kenny Green. I was going to try to say your name with a Spanish flair, Kenny, but it's kind of hard. There's no S or Z in it, or... Gentlemen, who wants to go first?
Since you said my...
Okay, we'll start to my right and go to the left.
Good morning, Councilman.
But I don't want you guys fighting for who's more left. Just,
Good morning. My name is Carlos Rodriguez. I'm here representing Communities in Schools. I've worked for Communities in Schools as an administrator for over 8 years. There's a couple questions that I'd like to be able to make sure that are addressed with regards to the RFQ. First and foremost is that lead agencies must be able to administer, monitor, and report on how funds are being distributed across services and/or providers, as well as develop timetables based on the scope of services and goals. As an administrator, and I know you've mentioned your bill, the Chef Cardenas, I've seen that whole debacle unfold on my eyes. So I bring this first question because I've seen how fiscal management that are out of has been out of control, not at the CBO level or at the street level, but primarily between administrators or mid-managers of county agencies and or state administrators, where there's been lack of communication of what the program goals were. So there's got to be a better tightening as far as not only educating our communities, but also educating those that are entrusted to work within governmental agencies to understand what the program shifts are, especially when it comes to pragmatic shifts. Agencies must be able to provide clear job descriptions that the scope of personnel duties, authorities, and responsibilities. Program managers at CBO levels have to have the ability to demonstrate that they can read a contract, that they can negotiate with those mid-level managers at the county or state level. And also, I've added two more after listening to Kim and Alex and Belinda with regards to startup.
continue.
I think it was very important that when Chef Cardenas was able to provide JJCPA money through the county and eventually through probation to start up the whole process, that there was money allocated for startup funds. Unfortunately, the startup funds primarily were used to build a false sense of communication with probation. A good example, and I'm going to teeter between the city reporting system, which is the ISIS, and the county's webpage, which was developed through the Board of Corrections. Both systems' faults are that there's not a two-way communication. So how can we have startup money to have your computers updated with the newest versions to do online reporting, both fiscally and programmatic, and yet when the monitor comes out and evaluates your program, they're getting directions and or evaluation or assessments from the state, which was never part of the original contract or program outcome. So numbers are being juggled around, and unfortunately, the ones that look bad are going to be the CBOs, because they're going to say they didn't have the infrastructure. And with technology now, that's really not an excuse anymore. It's, in my opinion, my humble opinion, it's those people that are working within agencies, whether at the county level, at the state level, at the city level, that just don't understand the program, haven't read the contract, don't understand the dynamics that intervention workers have to go through and or prevention workers have to go through. And lastly, I'm going to touch upon the evidence-based versus experience. Evidence-based is a new euphemism that's being used to try to make sure that dollars that are assigned to these programs are going to be used to really change society. And I just don't see it when it comes to this population. Even at the federal level, my understanding, it's $5,000 per youth. And you've just mentioned what the realistic costs are. You've listened from the previous panel to change the life of a youth that has been involved generationally with gangs isn't going to be $5,000 over a one-year period. You've got to really treat the family, the root cause. We've been able, unfortunately, to change too many lives without not using city or county or federal money. We've had to go to private philanthropists to help us. And they're really starting to understand that dollars and programs don't change lives. It's people doing the work. And we've got to do a better job of listening to those that are doing the work and be able to be monitored to the point where if we say this kid needs additional funding or this family needs additional funding, you can't punish the program because the program's there to change, whether it's reducing gang violence, reducing gang crime, having the students go into reducing truancy. So there's a lot of more issues involved with gang intervention, gang prevention.
So you feel that the contracts, when they're finally awarded for the intervention work that is done in the city, that the city needs to make sure that we appropriately fund those programs so that they can, in fact, give us that feedback. And that the ability to provide that feedback and to accumulate that information and to delve into the details and report those details, there needs to be funding for that as well.
Absolutely. I think the breakdown in communication has hurt the city and our communities more than anything else. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, and we all want to work together. There's great people out that work for the city and the county and the state. There's great probation officers. There's great police officers, but sometimes their hands are tied because within their own agency, just like within our agency, we have to follow certain protocols and procedures because they're mandated per contract.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, Councilman. My name is Robert Hernandez from Communities and Schools. I have a master's in social work from USC. My position at Communities and Schools is the social worker, lead social worker on staff, as well as their director of performance management. I suggest that when you're looking at the RFQ, priority be given to applicants who demonstrate effective integration of services, which can be verified by letters of agreements between prong 1 and prong 2 providers. For example, 55% of services which would be allocated for prong 1 services, the actual gang intervention workers, practitioners out on the streets engaging with the violence, reduced. 30% for prong 2 services, which is the wraparound, integrative service delivery, job development, mental health, and then 10% administration and 5% for accountability and assessments. This is somewhat how we function at CIS and how we do it because we have the prong 1, prong 2 housed in there. And this is my suggestion and this is what I'm looking at. And then also too, in terms of intervention, it's key and crucial to this that you do have the intervention with that treatment attached to it. And I'm not talking about suppression intervention. That's not intervention. We're talking about intervention workers that have that integrative service delivery attached to them so we could treat the gang violence. Because currently, everything that's rolling out isn't treating the actual violence and gang violence. And that must happen. So,
Okay. Anything else?
that's it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Kenny?
Yeah, good morning. Just thinking about this RFP, RFQ, this whole process that's coming down for the city of Los Angeles to I guess, provide services for the city of LA, we have to start with the model. That is so key in the
The
beginning.
intervention model?
Yes, sir. That wasn't written and wasn't adopted by accident by the city of Los Angeles. That model did not get adopted by, I've just heard Boston's going to adopt it now. communities in Maryland, World Vision. That is not done by accident. It has to start with that. It has to. And every one of those categories in that model is there for a reason. And going a little bit with the prong one situation, I've heard the dialogue with you and Alex and Belinda and Kim, and the prong one stuff, it's crisis response, it's conflict resolution, the most priority thing in our community right now. Those 12 zones didn't get chose, out of a hat. They didn't get, just say, okay, roll of the dice. These are the 12 guys we're going to roll out. That wasn't done by accident either. In those communities, the violence, and the quality of life has just been so eroded. That's why those are picked zones. And if you're going to, fund somebody that's going to do intervention in those zones, they better do something about dealing with the prong one and prong two stuff. That has to be, that's so crucial. I heard a little bit about, your dialogue with Alex dealing with all these different ethnic, ethnicities.
Continue. Go ahead.
You're dealing with, if you're responsible for a certain area, you better serve everybody in that area. And if you can't do it, you better partner with somebody in that area. Because it's not fair for you to service one group of people and forget about everybody else. That's not LA. That's not what the United States stands for. So if we're going to deal with violence, we don't just choose one ethnicity. We don't do that. And, I heard a little bit about the LA Unified. City employees in intervention and prevention are servicing LA Unified on a daily basis, whether it's helping them with the academic, which a lot of the prevention programs are city funded doing it, and whether it's intervention dealing with the violence on campus. It's a good partnership. Maybe LA Unified is not given a penny and the city's picking up the tab to, for the services, but, I heard the dialogue on that too, and that's, those people in the community, they don't call us for nothing, but, and I heard a little bit about the prong two stuff. I have some issues with the present way of how we do, well, let me back up. Let's say I get called 2 o'clock in the morning to deal with a crisis, and I find out who maybe have been responsible for a shooting or shooting death or whatever it is. Track them down, we're talking to them. I might have a kid in my car that has a couple murders under his belt. And at that point, I may convince him, hey, you probably need to change your life. You got several people out gunning for you, and he's willing. Okay, maybe I do need to change. And what do I do with that kid 2 o'clock in the morning on a Friday night? Do I take him home until Monday morning to roll him out to an agency for some services? Do I take him to Robert Hernandez's house, 3 o'clock in the morning, knock on his door, drag him out of bed, give him some services, let's go to your agency? You know what I'm saying? The prong two stuff has to understand this population. Can't put them on a waiting list 3 months down the line. We've got a very small window for this kid, very small window, and that window is closing, and we don't know when it's going to open again. So the wraparound services have to really, really understand this population, because if it doesn't, we're never going to get rid of this problem. We're never going to get rid of this problem. We have a lot of the services at our agency, but not every one of those services, we don't have a tattoo removal at our agency, stuff like that. People have to wait a 6-month waiting list, just small stuff like that. But, this has to start with that model. It has to start with that model, because everything is in that model right there. It has to start with it. And, it kind of disturbed me when I hear communities that aren't getting services because they are not the right ethnicity. I just keep going back to that, especially, dealing with Alex Sanchez all the time, and, heard how the Armenian, population had gotten to this big fight at Grant High or something, It just bothers me. It really do. Because if you're going to service the whole area, because we're trying to get this violence down so the community can have a better place to live, LA Unified, if there's a fight that's going to happen on campus, gang fight, parents are not sending their sending their children to school. If there are some problems in the neighborhood, children aren't going to school. They'd rather be home safely and miss out on an education. I mean, it's just screwed up. So, I can't say it enough. We got to start with that model because it addresses everything.
Yeah, for the first time, we have a model. The city of Los Angeles has given out contracts year after year after year without models, without bases of expectation, feedback requirements, and fortifying agencies to be able to handle the work that it takes to give that feedback and that information. This time, it's going to be holistic. These contracts are going to be holistic. And I think that what we're going to realize very quickly is that we haven't allotted enough money so far in order to give the appropriate amount of money based on the expectations and the eventual understanding of what these agencies are going to do for us in these communities. So the model is going to be a part of it. And I think for the first time, we're going to see the evidence that will require us to fortify more funding for intervention while during this transition that we've never done before. The only department who gets that kind of adjustment year after year after year is the police department. But for the first time, I think that you're going to see the city of Los Angeles and the policymakers actually, based on evidence and based on what we expect our service providers to do, that we're going to have to find ways of giving them more money as we move along. Not say, we get it, we understand that there needs to be more money given, but we don't have it, so deal with what you have. But we're going to need that information, we're going to need that feedback, we're going to need that correspondence in order for us to justify those adjustments. So be ready for that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our last public comment card is from Jose Carmona. Normally, you'd give it to the clerk and then hand them out. Give a copy to the, yes, for the record. Yeah, thank you.
My name is Joe Carmona. I've been working for the LA Unified High School District for 35 years. And basically most of the time in there has been working with gang kids, gang intervention inside the schools. And so...
Did you work at a junior high for a long time?
Huh?
Didn't you work at a junior high for a long time?
All the time. I was there all the
I
time.
thought you said high school.
No, I didn't. Anyway, I came to the concept, the idea that maybe I didn't explain what the youth league concept was that the LA Unified has put in there in the resolution. So I kind of broke it down into bullets, and I have it there in front of you. One of the biggest things, and let me just make it very clear, I do believe that the gang intervention thing that you put, what is that?
Gang intervention model?
Model is a great thing because now it'll get legitimacy, hopefully, that they'll be able to go to the schools, because I can guarantee you right now the gang intervention people are not really welcomed into the schools, of what I've seen in the schools all my years. And what I put on there is, very quickly, I just have a minute to go in there, but I'm just going to go as quickly as I can, okay? The schools are incubator of gangs here. I've seen them plan, organize, and recruit. The other thing I put on there, another bullet, until schools make stopping gang violence a top priority, we will continue to lose our children to gangs. Why? Because school personnel do not have the time to work with gangs, because school personnel do not have the training to work with gangs, and because there is no office or person that anybody can go to at present at LAUSD that is responsible for gang funds or programs. The other thing, we are at war with the minds and souls of our children. That's what we do in the schools. See, and one of the concepts of a youth lead gives our community youth a chance to fight back, is a collaboration effort between community and schools, and also has been tested and proven for the last 35 years that it does work. And everywhere it's been put, it has worked. What is the youth lead concept? And it's very simple right here. Natural leaders of the school are selected to represent their group, gang, crew. These leaders, male and female, are put into a daily...
Continue.
I just finish it off, okay? Daily accredited class based on a nonviolence curriculum. The support staff of this leadership class consists of 1, a teacher, 2, educational aide, 3, gang intervention specialists, which is, I think, the most important part, and 4, community resource specialists, and 5, program coordinator. Although educational performance is important, the primary goal of this class is something that only the students in this class, if chosen properly, can give, and only they can doing it together, and that is peace. Okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carmona. Is anybody else here to make public comment on item number 1 in this committee? We are on item number 1. Public comment is open. Seeing and hearing no more public comment. Public comment is now closed on item number 1. We'll hold this item in committee and instruct the CLA to return in 2 weeks with a draft scope of the work, and also instruct the CLA to take into consideration all the information that has been submitted to this committee and beyond. And okay, with that, we will hold this item in committee with those instructions, and we now move to general public comment. Is anybody here for general public comment? Seeing and hearing none, general public comment is now closed in this committee. This committee is now adjourned.